Howdy folks, and welcome back to Mingles with Jingles, the only weekly show on YouTube where you don't have to ask who let the togs out. I thought it might be a good idea this week to get what's pissed me off this week out of the way right at the start, so the rest of the video can be nice and happy and shiny. And it's not just something that's been pissing me off, it's been pissing off a lot of you as well. And that's to do with the Google Plus integration on YouTube, and how it's basically screwed a lot of stuff up. And particularly I'm talking about two things here: replying to comments and video notifications appearing in your subscription box, or not appearing in your subscription box. And there are a lot of you out there who are having the second problem, particularly when it comes to me releasing a new video, and you are just not getting notified about it. For some reason Google Plus has decided, no, you don't need to know about that. And it's annoying. Well, it's annoying me, and it's annoying a lot of you as well. In some cases, even when some of you are getting the notification that I've uploaded a new video, you think to yourself, actually, you know what, it's midnight. I'm not going to watch that now. I'll watch it at breakfast. And then the next time you come back to YouTube, the notification's gone. Google Plus, what the fuck? What are you doing? Sort it out. You're supposed to make things better, not worse. And then there's the system for leaving comments on the videos, or more specifically for leaving replies to comments on the videos, where you guys ask a question, and maybe it's a question that I don't really want to devote time to answering in the next Mingles with Jingles, but I can actually provide a reply there and then. But there's no bloody reply button. Where's it? What? Some of the comments have reply buttons. I can reply to the questions that you ask and the observations that you make on the videos. Some of them don't. Now, believe me, I have investigated this issue, and the general consensus of opinion is nobody knows. It's got nothing to do with the browser that you're using. Google certainly aren't providing any answers. It just, the best guess that the YouTube community can come up with is that it depends on the Google Plus account settings of the person who made the comment that you want to reply to, whether or not you actually get a reply button. But it's just guesswork. Google are, they're not helping. Nobody has a clue why you can reply to certain comments and you can't reply to certain others. And it's really, really annoying, because this was one of the good things about Google Plus integration on YouTube, in that you had more control over the comments section. Well, except you don't. And this has really been winding me up. So, for example, in last week's Mingles with Jingles, in the comments to the video, John T. Davis noted that the bowfighter in the clip at the end of the video had exactly the same markings as his bowfighter, and wanted to know if somehow I'd managed to get hold of a replay of his game. Not, a question I didn't really want to answer in this week's Mingles with Jingles. But there was no reply button on his comment. So, no, John T., I haven't somehow managed to steal your replay files. That was just a massive coincidence. That was actually my bowfighter. We apparently have excellent taste in aircraft and aircraft markings. But it was in fact my bowfighter and not yours. I would have replied directly to your comment on the last Mingles with Jingles, but for some reason Google decided that your comment was not worthy of being supplied with a reply button. Now, as for the whole lack of notifications in your subscriptions whenever I upload a new video, well, there's nothing I can directly do about that. I cannot make Google notify you when I upload a new video. I mean, I upload a new video every day, so if you check back every day, you're going to see a new video. But not everybody wants to watch every video I upload. Some people only want to watch the World of Tanks games. Some people only want to watch the War Thunder games. Some people only want to listen to Mingles with Jingles. Whatever. So I can understand your frustration. The only thing I can suggest is follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, or sign up to Duckster. Every time I upload a video, it automatically gets tweeted, and I always post a link to the video on my Facebook page. And Duckster also automatically hosts every new video I put up as well. So there's 3 different ways you can get around Google's massive fail with the video subscription notification system. If you are interested, I do recommend following me on Facebook, of the 3, purely because, for example, if I'm going to do something at short notice, say something pops up that I'm going to do that night, I can't do a video notification about it, because in the time it would take to make and upload a video announcing something that's happening the same night, it's probably too late. Whereas I can do a Facebook post in seconds. So yeah, my Facebook page. If you are interested, I do recommend that you follow me on Facebook, but there is also Twitter and there is also Duxter. Links to all three in the video description. If you are suffering from the whole problem of Google's subscription notifications not appearing in your inbox, this is the only thing I can think of to fix it, until Google get all their shit in one sock and fix it themselves. Anyway, last week we talked a bit about War Thunder on the PlayStation 4, and of course World of Tanks is also available on the Xbox 360, and the whole PC gaming master race thing reared its ugly head. And it's funny how snobby people can be with PCs when they're looking down on their console brethren. And even amongst PC owners, you've got that whole first-class, second-class citizen, particularly in flight sims like War Thunder, where you've got the joystick users who think they're better than everybody else, and then the mouse and keyboard users who think they're better than the console users. And it reminded me of a classic comedy sketch from the 1960s in a British show called That Was the Week That Was.
I look down on him because I am upper class.
I look up to him because he is upper class. But I look down on him because he is lower class. I am middle class. I know my place. I look up to them both. But I don't look up to him as much as I look up to him. Because he has got innate breeding.
I have got innate breeding, but I have not got any money. So sometimes I look up to him.
I still look up to him. Because although I have money, I am vulgar. But I'm not as vulgar as him. So I still look down on him. I know my place.
Yep, some things are just never going to change. We always have to find somebody to look down on, don't we? Who are the console users going to look down on? There's always World of Tanks Blitz, I suppose. Or it could be worse, you could be playing World of Warplanes. Speaking of War Thunder, American Rifleman 96, and that's his spelling, not mine, poses a question that I'm sure we've all had happen to us sooner or later. He says, Jingles, I've been playing War Thunder a lot lately, and I've been doing pretty well at it, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, I suck. Does this happen to you, and how do you deal with it? Yeah, of course it does. It happens to everybody. I mean, I put that Broken Fighter video up where I was playing with Elmo and Origin, and that was a fantastic game. Really, really fun game to play. All the games that I played with Elmo and Origin that day were great. And then the next day, I had a 6-hour session of War Thunder, and game after game after game was utter dog shit. They all sucked. I mean, I'd have some games where it would start off really, really well. And then the second I got shot down, that was it. Everything I touched turned to shit after that. And yeah, they're incredibly frustrating. You've just got to stop playing. Simple as that. Find something else. There's no use battering your head against a brick wall. It's one of the reasons why I don't live stream World of Tanks either. Well, not just World of Tanks, it's just one of the reasons why I don't live stream at all. I mean, if you've got a regular live stream schedule, like Quickie Baby, Origin, Circumflexes, for example, you have to be entertaining on demand. You know, you've got to be good on demand, otherwise people are going to get bored and they're going to stop watching. And if you're just having one of those days where everything is shit, you know, I can just stop playing. I can go and do something else. Play World of Warcraft, play, you know, whatever. I don't have to keep going. I don't have that responsibility to a live stream audience the way the Twitch live streamers do. That's why I could never do what they do. Because when you get that kind of shitty streak, it's just not entertaining to watch. Nobody wants to sit there watching you fail for hours and hours and hours. Well, some people do, but they're, you know, weird. And that's why I am never going to live stream World of Tanks, War Thunder, whatever. It's just not going to happen. So, yeah, you know, when you're having one of those really, really bad streaks, just stop playing. Do something else. Play a different game. read a book, watch a movie, take the dog for a walk, whatever. Because you get into that, and it happens to me when I'm on somebody else's live stream, where I start having a shitty streak of games. Like I'm a top tier 9 tank destroyer in a tier 9 match, and I don't do a single point of damage, and I get killed early on in the game. Awful, awful result. And it really, it disheartens me. And so I stop caring about the result, and that negatively affects your gameplay as well. And I just don't have that sense of, well, two, I don't have the level of skill in order for that not to happen with depressing regularity. And I don't have the mental fortitude, if you like, to keep battling on through and keep being entertaining when it does start happening the way that players like SWTOR and Quickie Baby do. And it does take quite a high degree of self-discipline to keep going in the face of poor gameplay without letting yourself get affected by, it's kind of like a negative feedback loop where, failure keeps breeding more failure. For example, you have a shitty result and it pisses you off, so you go into your next game angry and you make poor decisions and you have another shitty result. So you go into your next game convinced that the whole random number generator has got it in for you, when it isn't. It's your own poor performance. And you have another shitty result. And then you go into the next game expecting a shitty result and not really giving a good shit about the outcome. And so you play poorly and have another shitty result. Now this does affect me, because I just don't have the level of mental fortitude to fight through it and stay positive. But because I don't have a live stream audience to satisfy, I am at perfect liberty to just stop playing and watch a movie instead. But you can see that the live professionals, guys like Quickie Baby, guys like Zircon, particularly when Quickie Baby's having a bad streak, I have noticed in him the amount of self-discipline he has to take the poor result and analyse it, and then explain to his audience why stuff went wrong. Even in failure, he's educating his audience about, what you can learn from the failure itself. Whereas I just go, god damn it, and I'll just rage about it, which is amusing in its own way, but it's no good for me. I'd give myself an ulcer. So yeah, if it happens to you, just stop playing. Stop punishing yourself by making yourself continue to play and keep reinforcing failure. And if it does happen to you with such depressing regularity as it happens to me, then for God's sake, don't take up a Twitch live streaming career, whatever you do. Your blood pressure will kill you. Well, we've been talking quite a lot recently about a lot of these new spaceflight sims that are coming out. Games like Elite Dangerous and particularly Star Citizen. And lo and behold, Star Wars The Old Republic has only gone and released the Starfighter dogfighting section, expansion if you like, to the game. In a bizarre turn of events, BioWare have not exactly been shy about spamming my email inbox with at the slightest update to The Old Republic. I get an email about it. One of the game designers has a particularly nice lunch. I get an email about it. One of the graphics designers has an itch he can't scratch. I get a fucking email about it. Did they email me that this had been released? No, of course they didn't. I had to find out about this completely by accident. So anyway, The Old Republic, Starfighter. What is it? Is it any good? Well, I should probably start by saying that my expectations were probably unrealistically high based on the Jump to Lightspeed expansion for Star Wars Galaxies. And, I think it's entirely fair to draw comparisons between the two, because they are both the spaceflight expansions for a major Star Wars MMO. And whereas, this falls flat immediately when you compare the two, because in Jump to Lightspeed you had, absolutely everything. Starship crafting, starship module crafting, exploration. You could fly anywhere. You have multi-crew ships where, your own ship, you're piloting, you've got a friend sitting on the tactical console operating the shields and the missile launchers, you've got two other friends in the gun turrets, you've got other friends running around doing damage control and repairing systems as they get knocked out. You've got another friend putting out fires and basically medicing and keeping everybody alive as they're taking hits from console explosions and all sorts of stuff. It was fantastic. This, it's just another PvP warzone. That's all it is. And it's kind of held back. Held back, is that the right word? Probably not, but it'll do. And it's not so much just the Starfighter expansion as the whole Star Wars The Old Republic thing, because it's The Old Republic. It's basically prequel Star Wars. Well, actually, Jingles, The Old Republic was set 3,000 years before. Yeah, you know what? I don't care. It may as everything looks and feels and plays like prequel Star Wars. Prequel Star Wars is shit. And that's not just this expansion, it's the whole it's the whole problem that the Old Republic has had. If you take away the lightsabers, it's not Star Wars. It's just a generic science fiction MMO. And in a lot of cases, it's not even science fiction because there's all this melee combat. That's the whole mountain that the Old Republic has had to climb in the first place. The fact that it isn't classic Star Wars. There's no TIE fighters. There's no X-Wings. There's, I mean, what ship am I flying? I have no idea. And I don't care enough to find out what ship I'm flying. It's not a TIE fighter. It's not an X-Wing. It's not an A-Wing. It's not a Y-Wing. It's not a TIE Interceptor. It's just some random, generic, vaguely Star Wars prequel-looking pixel. I do not care enough about what I'm flying to really give a shit about what is essentially just another PvP warzone. They've made some nods towards the old X-Wing and TIE Fighter single-player PC games. You can see bottom left of the screen there, you've got your shield status indicator, and there are 3 different power bars which you had to juggle in X-Wing and TIE Fighter. Power between your shields, your weapons and your engines. That's all in there. And that is quite literally the only recognisably Star Wars thing about it. There is some depth to it though. You've got various different crew that you can have manning your ships, for example, that give various different special abilities during space combat. And I dare say there is quite it looks like it's just a straightforward arcade shooter, and it is a straightforward arcade shooter, but there is some depth to it. Just, not enough to keep me interested. And also, it requires ridiculous reflexes. It's very, very twitchy. And I'm old and slow, so I'm shit at it. So, there it is. Star Wars The Old Republic Starfighter. It's, if you like what you're looking at, then, and you are already a subscriber, subscribers have early access to this, then, yeah, it's there. It's not going to cost you anything. It's not like a proper expansion. It's more of a patch. So, knock yourself out if you like what you're looking at, but I can't see myself spending much time on this at all. It just felt like a real wasted opportunity. Speaking of wasted opportunities, one of the regular questions that I get on just about every episode of Mingles with Jingles, and in other World of Tanks videos, World of Tanks specifically, is, Jingles, what changes would you like to see made to World of Tanks, other than the removal of gold ammunition? Very, very popular question. And I was reminded of this question again while playing on the patch 8.10 test server, because there's something that I really wish they would put into World of Tanks, especially when I'm on the test server. Because you can't always get into a game in a certain tank, particularly low-level tanks. If you're not on the test server in the first couple of days, when people are pretty much just trying everything, it's very, very hard to get any kind of match in anything that's below tier 5. And anything that can get into a tier 10 game but isn't tier 10, so all the tier 8s and all the tier 9s are constantly, the matchmaking is just 14 tier 10s and then you. And it's next to impossible to, adequately assess a machine in those circumstances. And something that I've been wishing they'd do in World of Tanks for a while is give us more options in the training rooms. Something like the way you can take an aircraft for a test flight in War Thunder and choose the mode. You know, you can play it in full reel, arcade, historical flight model, and actually just fly the thing and see how it's going to handle, how it's going to respond, you know, with the full weapon loadout. And War Thunder could, you know, do better in this respect as well. For example, if you take an aircraft for a test flight, you pretty much just have one thing to shoot at. You know, there is a truck parked a couple of miles away from the airstrip. But that's better than you've got in World of Tanks. For a start, if you want to jump into a World of Tanks training room, it takes at least 2 people. Why? You know, if I just want to drive a tank around and see how it performs, see what the suspension's like, how well it drives off-road, how well it drives over rough ground, what the turret traverse is like, how much gun depression does it have, you know, I have to first find somebody else who's willing to join a training room with me. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And I dare say we've all been in that situation where we just get our hands on a new tank, we load it up for the first time, we press the battle button, and we find out that it has god-awful gun depression by getting our ass killed when trying to shoot somebody over the ridge of a hill. And there's got to be a better way of doing it. What's wrong with allowing us to take the thing for a test drive before we commit ourselves to battle and end up sucking and letting our team down because we didn't understand the capabilities of the new machine? You know, the last place you want to be finding out, because the game doesn't tell you the stats of things like gun depression and ground resistance on the suspension. The worst possible time to find out that your tank has no gun depression, or that it becomes practically immobile the second you go off-road because the suspension is so bad. The worst possible place to find that out is in the middle of a battle when people are shooting at you. I mean, it can't be that hard to remove the requirement to have more than one player in a training room and to just give us the option of sticking some dummy targets down so we can actually drive the tank around without being under any pressure, see how the thing drives, see how the gun performs, see what the gun depression's like, take a few pot shots at stuff that isn't going to fire back, and just get used to, you know, get an idea of what to expect before we hit the battle button and we've got 14 other people relying on us to not suck. So yeah, I think that would definitely add value to World of Tanks, the ability to test drive a tank before you take it in a battle for the first time. Speaking of new features in World of Tanks, question here from the Soldier Core. He wants to know, what do I think about the historical battles that are coming in a couple of patches in World of Tanks? Ah yes, historical battles. This is something that Wargaming have been promising for at least 2 years and has yet to materialise. But what do we actually mean by historical battles? Well, I don't know what Wargaming mean by historical battles, but I have a fairly good idea. And I have a fairly good idea because I actually used to belong to the EU World of Tanks historical battle community. And what we used to do, there was a shout out here to Zorin Warfield, who took a lot of time and effort into organising these historical battles. And what we would actually do would be, for example, the Battle of Prokhorovka, part of the Kursk offensive. We would have historically accurate loadouts. The kind of tanks that were actually involved in the battle would be the only tanks on both sides. So the Soviets would have the T-34s with the 85mm gun. The Germans would have the Panther with the 75mm gun. The Ferdinand with the long 88mm gun. One Tiger P, because one of them was actually used as a command vehicle in the Battle of Kursk, for example. The Russians would have a couple of Su-152 tank destroyers. Su-85 tank destroyers. Only the machines that actually took part in the battle. With the loadouts that they used in the battle. So, you know, you don't get any KV-1Ss driving around with 122mm guns, for example. You don't get Panthers with the short 88mm gun, right? They have to use the 75mm, the actual weapons and loadouts that the tanks used in that battle at the time. Now, obviously, a Panther is a better tank than a T-34-85. It's a Tier 7 medium versus a Tier 6 medium, and the Tier 7 mediums have a lot more health than the Tier 6 mediums. At the time there was no VK3002M, the old Tier 6 Panther prototype. So there was some hefty balancing had to go on. The Russians, not just for balance reasons, but also for historical reasons, had to severely outnumber the German forces, and so on and so on. And the games were really, really good. It was something different to look forward to on a Sunday. And Wargaming did take a keen interest in how we organised these games. But that interest didn't really seem to lead anywhere, because 2 years later we're still waiting for historical battles in World of Tanks. Now, if Wargaming do ever get off their asses and implement this feature into the game, I imagine you're going to have to live with certain limitations. I mean, the way they run these things in War Thunder at the moment is it's part of events. And let's say, for example, the current event in historical battles in War Thunder is Iwo Jima. Well, if you don't have a Shinkai or a Zero, or what is it, the Shinzen bomber, the G8N1, you're stuffed. You can't take part as the Japanese. The Americans, you have to have P-51 Mustang, B-24 Liberator. I think Bearcats also get into it, and that's pretty much it. There's a very, very limited range of actual aircraft that were eligible to fly, and if you do the same sort of thing in World of Tanks, in order to make it, actually historical, if you don't have the tanks that took part in whichever battle is running at the time, you can't take part in the battle. There's no point in queuing up in your Cromwell tank to take part in the Battle of El Guitar, which was fought between the US forces and the Germans. Simple as that. There's also the question of just how historical are these historical battles going to be. Let's say, for example, you want to take part in the historical Battle of Kasserine Pass, which was fought in North Africa, and you queue up your M4 Sherman, but your M4 Sherman has the M1A1 76mm gun installed on it. The Shermans didn't have that gun at the Battle of Kasserine Pass. They had the 75mm gun M3, which was the gun from the M3 Lee. So what's going to happen then? Is the game automatically going to equip the correct gun for the battle that you're playing? Or are you it's just how detailed do you want it to be for it to actually be a historical battle? Or are you just going to go down the War Thunder historical battle approach and have it no more historically accurate than just making sure that it's all Americans on one side and all Germans on the other side, and you can drive whichever tank you like? And, I'm sure that there are plenty of people out there who would love to see that kind of game. But there's nothing really historical about it. So, and I think this is probably why Wargaming have dragged their heels over introducing the whole historical battle thing into World of Tanks, because there's a lot of problems involved in making it work properly, depending on how authentic you want to make the experience. You certainly could do it, but the matchmaking... and again, as an example, fighting the Battle of the Kasserine Pass, where the Americans had M3 Stuarts, they had M4 Shermans, they had M3 Lees. Who's going to want to be in the M3 Stuart? Who's going to want to be in the M3 Lee? So are you actually going to get... you sit there, you pick the tanks that were actually involved in the battle. Everybody's going to pick a Sherman. Nobody's going to want to drive a Lee when they could be driving a Sherman. So the battles are not going to be... if you're left to choose the kind of tank you want to drive, the battles aren't going to be historically accurate anyway, because it's just going to be a bunch of Shermans against a bunch of Panzer IVs. There's going to be no Panzer IIIs, no Panzer IIAs. There's going to be nobody playing M3 Lees, nobody playing M5 or M3 Stuarts, because everybody wants to play the best tank available in that battle. And these are the kind of problems that Wargaming are facing with implementing the whole historical battle concept into World of Tanks. I imagine, I don't have any information from Wargaming, but I can definitely see these kind of problems being there, and is probably why they've taken so long to actually, get this thing into the game, if they ever are going to get it into the game. And I've been waiting 2 years for it. It hasn't happened yet. We shall have to see. Centurion Gaming wants to know, Jingles, what would you think if Gaijin announced they were going to put the B-29 Superfortress into War Thunder? I love it when I get these kind of questions, because I take great pleasure in telling people things that they obviously don't know. Gaijin have announced that they're going to put the B-29 Superfortress into War Thunder. It's coming. Don't know when, but it is going to be in the game. How do I know this? Well, it's on their website. So if you pop over to the War Thunder main webpage, and you click on Game and Release Tree, there's all sorts. You know, I often get not so much about although the B-29 Superfortresses is probably the most popular. Jingles, wouldn't you like to see this plane in the game question that I get? But there's all sorts of different questions, and if you were to have a look at this part of the War Thunder website, you'd be surprised. Let's have a look at America. There we go. What do we have? We've got Army fighters, Navy fighters. We've got attack aircraft. Look, the A-36 Apache, the A-1 Sky Raider, Army bombers, and right down there at the bottom, there it is, B-29 Superfortress. 5 different versions of the B-24 Liberator. We're getting the Helldiver. God, what else? Thunderjet, the F-84 Thunderjet, the P-61 Black Widow. You know, there's all kinds of aircraft that are scheduled to be incorporated into the game. And it's all here in the release tree. For example, have a look at Great Britain. Twin-engine fighters, the Westland Whirlwind. You know, obviously we've got lots and lots of different bow fighters. The Hornet F1 and F3. Navy fighters, the Fulmar, the Firefly. 2 different versions of the Sea Hurricane. 2 different versions of the Seafire, the Sea Fury. Bombers, we're getting the Whitley bomber. There's the 3 versions of the Wellington that are already in there. We're getting a British B-25, you know, the Firebrand. 2 different versions of the Lancaster. 3 different versions of the Vampire. This is all what is planned for release into War Thunder. And I'm surprised that more people aren't aware of this thing. You know, the information's all there on the website, if you just know where to look. So head over to the War Thunder website. You know, all these aircraft that you wish were in the game, you have a look at the various different release trees. You may be surprised that they are actually scheduled to be incorporated in the game at some point in the future. B-29 Superfortress just being one of them. Right, time for a few more questions before we bring this one to a close. I like this one. This is from True Canadian. He wants to know, Jingles, what do you think about today's younger generation? It's the prerogative of the older generation to constantly complain about the younger generation. It's just what old people do. You know, I can remember going to a briefing by the Director of Naval Training and Recruiting, and it was addressing exactly this issue, the quality of recruits that were coming through the gates of HMS Raleigh, the training establishment, today, compared to how it had been in the past. Like when I, for example, was going through basic training, because that's always the complaint, isn't it? Kids these days don't know they're born. If they don't go through the kind of training I had to go through, and so on and so on and so on. And he had a presentation on this subject, and flashing up on the screen were quotes specifically about the quality of the younger generation, and you know, the sort of things like, you know, the usual complaint. Kids these days have got it too easy. We don't have the same quality of recruit coming through the gates that we did when I joined up, and so on and so on. And then when he finished showing us all these different quotes, he asked us how many of us agreed with, you know, the quotes that we'd seen. And the overwhelming majority of, you know, silly old bastards like me all stuck a hand up and said, yep, completely agree. And it turned out that those quotes were actually from Army training staff, sergeants, in the 1950s, talking about, you know, the kind of people that had served in the Second World War, talking about the quality of recruits that were coming through Army training centres in the 1950s. It never changes, right? The older generation always think the younger generation have got it easy, they don't have any respect, right? You know, they never had to go through what we had to go through. It never changes, and I'll guarantee you that when those training sergeants in the 1950s who'd fought in the Second World War, when they were going through training, the guys that were training them from the 20s and 30s said exactly the same thing about them. And these were the guys that won the Second World War. So, yeah, I do whine and moan and whinge and complain about the younger generation of kids these days, because I'm a silly old sod and that's what we do. But I'll guarantee you, kids today, 30 years from now, they will be whining about kids today. Nothing will ever change. And don't forget, right, it's always kids today who have to fight your wars for you. And they do seem to do a pretty good job. So, you know, they can't all be that bad. And, you know, the older generation forget that while we're sitting here going on about how, oh, kids today don't respect their elders the way we did, and so on and so on. When we were kids, our older generation was saying that about us, and we seem to think we turned out all right. And the common refrain from the older generation is, it's always the same. They always say, well, it wasn't like that in my day. Yes, it was. Of course it was. Look at the Second World War generation, for an example. I mean, rightly hailed as the generation that made the supreme sacrifice and fought the good fight. And yet, there were hundreds of thousands of collaborators, profiteers, skivers, malingerers, deserters. They had their share of scumbags too. You know, nothing ever changes. So, yeah, you may occasionally hear me whinging about today's generation. But that's my right as a silly old bastard. It doesn't mean I'm correct. Final question of the day, and I'm going to throw this one open to the audience. Comes from Just a Happy Fellow. He wants to know, Jingles, what's the worst game you've ever played? I have played some real stinkers, but they were mostly a really long time ago. Generally speaking, I managed to avoid the really, really bad games by virtue of, looking them up on the internet and finding out what they're like before I spend any money on them, but I have been caught out a couple of times. Most recently, I spent money on X Rebirth, which is comically bad on so many different levels, which is a real shame because I loved the earlier X games, but this latest one is and it's a shame because it's obviously had a lot of money spent on it, and the game developers have obviously put a lot of heart and soul into it, but it's terrible. Nobody sets out to make a bad game, surely. Surely everybody is trying their best to make the best game they can, and yet somehow we end up with games like, Infestation Survivor Stories. There's another one. This was originally called The War Z, and ended up, it was available on Steam, but they basically lied. That the Steam release promised all sorts of things that just weren't in the game. They said, they said they would have private servers. They didn't. They said that you can have up to 100 people playing on each server. You couldn't. It was capped at 50. They said, they just lied. And the game itself is disastrously bad. It is just so amateurish. I can't believe that this was actually written in the 21st century. In fact, I've got it. I saw it on the Steam Summer Sale. Infestation Survivor Stories. I thought, it's another one of these zombie survival horror games. Brilliant, I'll have that. Big mistake. I mean, it cost me pennies, but I still felt like I'd been seen off and I should have had my money back. I'm going to do a video of it at some point in the future, just so you can, worst game ever. It's terribly bad. Other games that should never have seen the light of day? Is it too soon to say World of Warplanes? The World of Warplanes video that I did, or one of them, has had almost 500,000 views, and has probably, I don't know if it's fair to say it has informed the opinion of lots and lots of potential World of Warplanes players. I think what's actually happened is the massive flame war that's kicked off in the comments of that video between the Wargaming fanboys on one hand and the War Thunder fanboys on the other hand. The comments on that video turned into such a toxic mess that I gave up even reading them after the first week. So what about you lot? What do you think? What's the worst game you have ever played? Let's see what you think in the comments to this video. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield, and I will catch you next time.